Hey, good afternoon. This is Joseph Jones, and he is lead in Norfolk for communities and schools. And he's agreed to take a few minutes out this afternoon to talk to me about the pandemic experience, about what equity looks and feels like to him in the classroom environment, and the conversations around masks and being vulnerable with each other, and concerns that introduces when you go back home, and what all of this caution for months and months has brought to the school environment as we think about going forward and starting to take fewer precautions. That introduces new sets of fears, but also opens us up to connecting with each other better. So it's opportunity, but it's also cause for concern. And I just wanted to thank you again so much for adding your voice to this series of podcasts, talking to teachers and people who work in the school environment. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and what Communities and Schools does, and then share with me what we were just talking about, if you can get back into that zone.
So my name is Joseph Jones. I'm with Communities and Schools of Hampton Roads. A lot of people kind of see us as case managers, but we do so much more. We provide a lot to our students. Our mission statement is to surround students with a community of support, empowering them to stay in school and achieve in life. What that means in a nutshell is that we support our students by creating relationships with them and just helping them get whatever they need. And we'll talk more about it when we talk about equity, because this is what we bring to the table. We want to make sure that we are giving our students the chance to rise to success. But you were referring to the mask mandate and how educators feel about it. It's a double-edged sword, because I think we all want to go back to that sense of normalcy where we're able to connect with others. I think when you have the mask on, oftentimes you feel as if you can't really see how people feel. I mean, oftentimes we use those cues with our mouth, or cues with how people's facial expressions come about, and we can't really see or decide what is the context. Now, working with teenagers, that's presents all new problems, because sometimes you might say something one way, but you're thinking, oh, well, I use the right facial cues, but you've got a mask on, so it's difficult. But as a educator, it's difficult too, because you want to protect your family, you want to protect your students. You never want to put either one in harm's way. I was telling you that I have my parents, they're in their 60s, and I want to make sure that not only am I protecting them, but because I work in a school that has 1,000+ students, I want to make sure that I'm playing it safe or erring on the side of caution, because I never know when I put myself in harm's way. Yes, we have masks. Yes, we have ways to, or protocols to protect ourselves. But with the rate of transmission currently, or when we're talking about variants, you never know what's going to happen. So we definitely want to make sure that we're being safe and protecting our students, but we also want to make sure that we're protecting the people closest to us, which is our family members.
Right. And you don't really know how short that incubation period is. So you feel like, gosh, I was just somewhere yesterday. If the next variant comes with an incubation period as short as Omicron, then you don't, you're in a situation where you're feeling like you need to test every day before you see family. And it's just that constant stress, right, that you're carrying with you all the time. So on the one hand, everyone has dealt with so much stress and they're fatigued. You were saying kind of exhausted by the stress of being careful, but at the same time, you're not sure when to let up. And educators are going home, and potentially many of them live with family or live close to family, and so are worried about older family members at home.
Yeah, and I don't live with my parents, but oftentimes I visit them a lot, especially on the weekends. But you never know, okay, am I asymptomatic? Do I just not have something going on? Even the slightest cough can make you think, okay, well, is it a good decision to visit my family?
Right. It's so much stress.
Yeah. There was a situation actually that recently happened about a month ago. I went out with my significant other to a restaurant. And I was like, okay, we're going to this restaurant. of course, a lot of people weren't wearing masks, and the tables were often like very close.
Right.
I had to think to myself, like, okay, I put myself in this situation, but I wanted to see my parents afterwards. The plan was to visit them afterwards, but I didn't feel confident enough to put them in harm's way. So I
Yeah.
told my mom, and I was like, Mom, I want to see you all. I love you guys, but I do not want to put you in harm's way because they both are older people, and I know that if something did happen, it would it would definitely damage their lives, and it would damage my life.
Right, right. Loss all around. So then you're thinking about just how quickly, like, the virus obviously can't replicate in hours. And so, I mean, you could meet them on the front porch outside, immediately after dinner, but you're going through all of these, you know, war games against the virus in your mind, right? Thinking about what you could possibly do to protect everybody. It's totally exhausting. Talk to me a little bit about the classroom environment. So you're in a high school, right?
Middle school.
In a middle school? Okay. And you were saying before that the kids have put two and two together. They know that they're hanging out with friends outside of school without masks, and they, very often don't see consequences to it. And then they come to school, with masks on. And now I think is it mask optional in Norfolk now?
So in I think across the board, they've ruled that the mandate that they're not going trying to go against the law.
Mm,
So it is optional. Um, Depends on the school that you go to. Many kids will wear masks because a parent, requests that they do. But
yeah,
oftentimes, with students, like if you tell them one thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the truth. Like they'll
right.
go against it. So you'll see students that sometimes have their mask off, even if their parent requested it. But it's definitely students really like the option or the freedom to choose.
Mhm,
Um, and it's really different based on we see it as, okay, we're doing this to protect ourselves. The
mhm,
students see it as, okay, well, you're telling us to put these masks on, but we see these people every single day. There's really no need for us to be so harsh with the regulations, because 9 times out of 10, they're either drinking out of the same bottles, they're
mm,
hanging out with them after school, they're sharing all the things that typical students would do before the
mhm.
pandemic happened. They're
Yeah.
not thinking about those things, so it's hard. And
So it's a battle not worth fighting in their minds, and maybe in some educators' minds, like why focus so much on the mask at school, maybe because ultimately, there's exposures happening around school and outside of school at the same time. And if the mask is meant to protect you, meaning the person wearing it, then the person wearing it, I guess, feels like they have the choice to wear it or not, because they're opting for exposures outside of school anyway.
yeah,
And now we have vaccines, which are to help us. So I can really see how the students are feeling, like they would prefer to have the opportunity to choose.
yeah.
So are the educators generally feeling like masks are there to protect them? Or do they feel more vulnerable in a classroom with more students unmasking? Do some of them feel that way?
Yeah, so there are teachers and staff members that feel like the masks protect them and their family. Um, there are teachers that have newborns. There are teachers who
Yeah,
have family members who may have illnesses, and they might feel like they need to protect their family. There are
yeah.
some teachers that opt to double mask.
Mhm.
There's some teachers that don't feel safe unless they have a regulated mask. And that's important. I feel
Yeah,
like they have to do what's right for their family. I think
yeah,
we all work jobs, but we realize the most important thing, we work to protect or provide for our families.
right.
I know that there's educators out there that feel like the masks are kind of not necessary, and because they have the vaccine, they don't really see the importance of it because they are already protected with their immune system.
Right.
But I think for the most part, people are still wearing masks because they would like to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And some schools still mandate that the teachers wear their masks. because it's just kind of a part of professionalism.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure that we are staying as safe as possible. And I don't know if you're aware, but we've lost a lot of teachers due to the pandemic and due to sickness. So we have a shortage of bus drivers, we have a shortage of teachers, and we have to pull other people if we can't get substitutes to support those classes.
Yeah, it's terrible, right? Are you speaking mortality loss in addition to attrition? And because I have seen those losses where we are as well, even in for bus drivers. It's hard to know, how many tragedies there are that have actually hit. I know that we have educators who are stressed, very stressed, and thinking about leaving the profession. So we have those losses. And then we have loss of life as well. And in communities like where you're serving that have been particularly hard hit, we have that double tragedy of loss of life and the tremendous concern about, being at risk and putting families at risk. So I'm not sure which you were speaking to specifically, but I definitely am concerned about both.
Yeah. And I know that parents or students and parents feel that same way. When the pandemic started, a lot of students wouldn't go outside because it was the fear of, will I bring something home?
Mhm.
And when you're talking about environments or communities, when you have Section 8 housing or housing that's traditionally lower income, they're right on top of each other. So the risk is greater.
Yes,
It's it breeds fear of how close is too close. And it's a scary feeling when you lose somebody and you aren't in control of what happens next. So
right.
I agree with you. I think whether it be a loss of a teacher or a bus driver in the sense of losing their job or losing their life, I think it still has like a big, it weighs heavily on people.
Huge, huge. I mean, I actually got COVID before vaccines were available and things like that. And I remember how terrified I was because you feel like there's no safety net. You don't know where to go. You're not sure that there's, anything that can treat you, and you're left alone with you and your body, hoping for the best. And I remember feeling very, very isolated. And we actually lost my stepmom to COVID as well. She passed away. And so I definitely understand and appreciate that sense of grief by, going about life. She passed away after Thanksgiving. The family got together and had the situation that you were describing, that you were so worried about, where asymptomatic COVID passed around the table. And so I haven't shared this publicly on a podcast like this yet, but I appreciate where you're coming from very, very much, because you don't know. You imagine the worst, but when it comes home, there's nothing there. There's no comparison to what it's like to read and prepare and to hope that you have a plan, and then to actually have that happen to your family. It's it's just your brain goes white. And so I can appreciate, even though we have vaccines now, there's still, there's lack of trust in the system. Are the vaccines safe? I do outreach at the market when I'm standing in line. I try to find people who are willing to talk, and I try to find people who are not yet vaccinated to understand what their concerns are. And in gas stations as well, I try to just see who might be willing to speak to me. And there's a lot of concern about, I know I'm at risk, but I don't know if I can trust the vaccines either. And so it's like that double, the duality you were talking about, that double jeopardy where you know that you're at risk, but yet you don't know if the thing that you're being told to do is the right thing to do for you and your family. And I can only imagine how hard that is. I know that I've been talking to your communities and schools folks about vaccine uptake in the Norfolk area, and I've been watching it carefully. I've been watching the rates by race. I don't have access to it by income level, but I know how that often travels. The distrust in systems and poor outreach and just not knowing where exactly to go. Do I need an appointment? What are the side effects going to be? Will I not be able to work the next day? I already have something going on. Will it make, one lady in Food Lion said, I already have a blood disorder. I don't know if the vaccine will make that worse. Like, she just didn't have places to go where she could get answers to questions. She didn't have routine people that she could just talk to and trust to go sort things out. So I don't know what the answers are, but I do feel like one-on-one, human to human connections are where we are now. No amount of signage or emails or, outreach to a population is quite enough at this point. It's making connections human to human, which is why I wanted to talk to you. And I'm sorry I just took so long to say that.
And I also want to say sorry for your loss, because I feel like have been so many people that have been impacted by COVID,
Mhm.
but we don't take a moment to, just say that or connect with people and acknowledge their loss. So, and it's definitely a scary feeling. I know I can only speak on my experience. I definitely was hesitant to get the vaccine because there's a lot of mistrust in government and the speed of which the vaccine was created. In the beginning, it was told that, vaccine was like years off, and then we got a vaccine. But like you said, we kind of have to protect the people that we care about. And at the end of the day, if we make the wrong decision, there's so many other lives that are in stake, and we have to make the right call. Now, to each person who is making that decision, you have to decide what's the right call, but you also have to live with your decision. So I think that everyone has to make that decision, but just be knowledgeable of it. And I think this brings us to like the conversation of equity,
Right.
because a lot of people who are questioning, they might not have they might have the opportunity to get the vaccine, but they might not have the knowledge, or they might not have the information that they need to actually put it into use. And that's a scary thing, because there's not everyone has the opportunities or the information to make the right decision. There are a lot of people who have heard about the negative trials of certain vaccines like Johnson and Johnson and how it's negatively impacted other people. And we have anecdotal data that will say, this is not the right call. Maybe we should wait a little bit longer. And then we have people from the government standpoint or from the medical field or the CDC saying, this is a safe vaccine. And I think it's human nature to question. It's human nature to feel like we need to get all the information before we make the decision, because every human loves the idea of choice, or the
Mhm.
to at least choose. So I can understand both sides, but at the end of the day, you have to make the right decision for yourself. You have to make the right decision for your family. You have to make the right decision for your community.
Mhm. And you guys have been doing vaccine outreach, I think, right? Communities and schools. I believe that you were actually taking people to the big center at Military Circle
Yeah. So
before school opened.
a lot of what we do is providing a lot of our families with things that they wouldn't be able to get access to. Um, and we want to make sure that we're doing right by everyone, because many people, the populations that we serve, we work in Title I schools, they might not have transportation. They might not know how to get to these certain places, or know how to, like you said, schedule an appointment. Um, and that's what a community's for.
Right.
Ultimately, we want to be there for the people that need us, because you never know how it can impact you directly or indirectly.
So you're closing gaps. To you, equity means closing gaps, whether it's information gaps or even, geographical distance by providing transportation, helping with appointments. communicating information, being a trusted source of information. Is that a fair way of describing what equity really feels like to you on a daily basis?
Yes, yes. And for someone said it best, equity is all about opportunity and access.
Okay.
You can have, you can give everyone the same opportunity, but if they don't have the access to the resources to take advantage of that opportunity, then it's a lost cause. You can give somebody, I remember when I was in high school, we had a French trip to go to France, and I had the opportunity, and that was great, but I didn't have the resources or the funds for that.
Mm.
So just like in education, we understand that there's a different approach to teaching um, kids. It's not a one size fits all. We have to go about it in certain ways to allow people to rise to the occasion. And if we don't, we
Yeah.
can't just stop at giving them the opportunity. You have to give
Right,
them
right.
access. So
Yes, and
yes.
even in differentiated instruction, you provide multiple entry points to a problem or a question, right? So to make it accessible, to make the learning target accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and that's, and it's tough because I think a lot of people sometimes forget that students do learn in different ways. And I think with the pandemic, we've kind of seen it's difficult, especially in Title I schools, where you have so many ways, or we're trying to get everybody on the same wavelength, but students who need specific accommodations or who need specific things, sometimes they don't get what they need, especially during the pandemic year.
Mhm.
Or we're still in the pandemic, but the first year of the pandemic, um, there were some people that received Chromebooks, but they didn't have Wi-Fi. There were some
Mhm.
people who received instruction, but they weren't able to use it because there were other things going on. Um, when we talk about equity and when we talk about these opportunities and access, if and I want to kind of bring it back to something a little bit more simple to understand, but if you're not feeling well, if you're not doing well at work, you call off, you go home because you feel like you're not able to focus.
Yeah.
Uh, it goes back to our hierarchy of needs.
Mhm.
But with these students during the pandemic, there were many things going on. And they couldn't call out. They couldn't just tune out. We were still expecting the students to rise to the occasion. And I think that's something that I feel like really was impacted by the pandemic. We kind of learned that a lot of students were not getting opportunities or weren't able to rise to the occasion because there were other things going on.
You make such a good point with that hierarchy of needs. And I wonder if that's even true in the classroom. Now we've gone back into school, so maybe not, they're not at home with a Chromebook, but they're back in school and there's still probably a lot of distractions pulling their attention away. I heard that from another teacher where she was talking about the challenge. She's in Oregon, and so very strict mask rules and things like that. And so lots of attention on mitigations and distancing and pull your mask up. And that was draining all of the resources away from teaching. So like you were saying, there's opportunity to learn, but the access to the information, the ability to learn, to take advantage of those opportunities was tough because there are so many distractions. Do you feel like that the current classroom environment is challenged by that where you are as well?
Yes, very, very much so, because I'm definitely seeing students are different than they were in the pre-COVID time.
Oh, really?
Like there's a lack of motivation.
Yeah,
And
talk to me about that. What is that? That's true for like every student.
yeah, and I think it's something we've seen on a macro scale, like
Yeah.
even when it comes to teachers. Um, we saw a lot of people leave in droves their jobs and go to something along the lines of their passions.
Mhm.
Students saw all of this and they had unstructured time and they felt like, okay, well, I have all these things going on. How can I give my attention to education? And there's no we see the long-term implications of how it can
Right.
impact their lives, but there's no real short-term payoff other than a good job for
Yeah.
students.
Yep.
And even when we're talking back to the hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
if your basic needs aren't met, you have no motivation to reach those other higher levels. And I think we're asking students to perform and we're asking them to do well, but we don't even know if their basic needs are being met. And
Mhm.
that's difficult because as adults, we understand that if we don't have our basic needs met, we can't do certain things. If we
It's so
aren't,
true.
yeah, if we aren't able to have a decent meal, or if we aren't able to have shelter, if we're not able to have water, if we're not able to have the necessary things to get us to at least be okay, we can't face the world.
Right.
But
How in
these,
the world can you be connecting the dots from short-term, pain to long-term gain? How in the world do you make that connection when you have all of those other concerns that are more pressing? Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
it's tough because the communities that I've served, worked in, the students are thinking about the now. And it's
Mhm.
I think every teenager thinks about just the now. And unfortunately, it leads them to a lot of bad decisions. But we see that sometimes there are sacrifices that are made because of the culture of their community or their family. We've seen so many students that were withdrawn from in-person learning, even now, to staying virtual because there were needs at home that needed to be taken care of, and there was nobody else who could take care of it. Or I've seen students who ended up working, and
Mhm.
it's odd to think that middle schoolers are being put in positions where they have to work because they know they have to provide for themselves, and they're thinking about how to take care of themselves because there might not be other people who can take care of them. Um,
Mhm.
we talked about the loss of people during the pandemic. There are families that have lost the main caregiver, and students have to rise to the occasion and take care of their family. And the only way that they know how, of thinking about right now. So when we talk about the pandemic and we talk about equity, it's it's scary to think that there's so many communities out there that students don't have their basic needs, so they're not being motivated to pursue education further. And honestly, people don't think about that when it comes to further higher education because nobody wants to continue in education if there's no real payoff. If my life is
Mhm.
impacted by
Right.
what I'm doing now, why should I continue? And that's why we want to try to tackle and work with students, because the motivation, if they can see that there is a payoff to it and there is a tangible thing that they can subscribe to or work towards, I think that they're more likely to stay in school. They're more likely to see, all right, well, this can help me out. Even if they just graduate high school,
Mhm.
just, hey, well, they have vocational training, they have opportunities for you in the workforce, you have the military, but just don't give up because you're going to settle and you're not going to be happy with that. So we definitely
Yeah.
see the low motivation.
You're right. So you're talking about bringing more proximal, tangible rewards of education and making it more visible to students to help them connect those dots maybe like for instance, I was working with high schoolers on cybersecurity. I had a cybersecurity team in Japan, and it was really fun. It was like organized around sort of a football league, and you learn different skills in a gymnasium, and then you compete over 48 hours. So I gave them pizza, and so they were learning things, really tangible things like password cracking and things. And you get different points. It was like a capture the flag sort of format, but I'm just thinking outside the box, things like that would give them tangible skills that would show them what they could do from anywhere, and actually be fairly fun, and they could work in a team environment at school or at home. That strikes me as one way to do what you're talking about, which is build in skills that are like real skills, real actual skills that are here and now, that don't require much in the way of access issues. There's no barriers. They just go onto a website and you can teach yourself, and you come out of it at the end of the day with marketable skills, a portfolio. Um, So is that kind of the thing you're talking about, where like if we could do more of that, that would close some of the gaps and maybe re-energize kids and give them some of this motivation back? Because it seems like doing the same old, it doesn't seem like it's really good. Like
Yeah, I think
just hitting the on button isn't enough, is kind of what I'm hearing.
yeah, I think we've all experienced school, and there are some people who love the lecture style, some people who love or crave that style, but I think we're growing out of traditional learning. Um, you know,
Mm,
there social media, our kids are being overly saturated with social media and learning that, there, and it might not be true that many of the people in social media are getting rich very quickly, but they're seeing
right.
these messages and they're thinking, okay, well, I can pursue becoming a Twitch gamer or a Twitch streamer or becoming just a gamer. So they're thinking about all these ways that they can become rich or get tangible
Mhm.
opportunity now. And education is not on the top of that list.
I see what you're saying. Yes. And so those are distractions, but they seem to connect the dots to, like, actually being able to support the family. It seems possible. The
Yeah.
possibility there is so attractive. That makes sense.
I think you are exactly right with giving them an actual opportunity to say, this is how you can implement it, because you can learn coding now. You can learn how to fix computers now. You can learn all these things that have real life applications, but you don't have to wait to get a degree. You don't have to wait to get all these other things. I think teaching our kids how to use education as a vehicle, but also giving them real world application that can be utilized right now. And of course, you have to keep it engaging because we're dealing with students,
Right.
but that's how you get students to invest in back to you.
Right, right. That at the end of the day, that's so important. It's about them. It's about helping them see that this is actually all about them. It's not just checking boxes because we want them to check boxes. We want to help them build their own futures and find hope for the future. I know that you have clubs that you have to go and prepare, but I hope that you'll consider this just part one of a conversation.
Oh, yeah, most,
Can
most
I come
definitely.
back in and check in with you? And now that you know what questions I have, and questions about motivation and equity and what can we actually do and what do you need from policymakers and other voices you might want to bring to the table, maybe even a few students who might be willing to share some of their thoughts, I would love to hear from them.
And it was actually, and I'm glad that you said that, because I had a chance to sit down with some of my students before, and I thought it was really important to get their perspective when it comes.
Yes.
I would love that. I would love that. And my
Would you
students,
do that? Will you help moderate it?
most definitely, yeah, I
Okay.
definitely have some students that are really invested in this conversation.
Oh, good, good. You have made my day. You have literally made my day. And it's such a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to coming back to that. Thank
Yep.
you.
Pleasure is all mine, and I look forward to talking with you further.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a great day and good clubs. I'll circle back with you soon.
All right.
Bye. Have to hit stop recording. There we go.
All right.